So I'm outside right now thinking about art and I'm looking at all the different textures around me. Remember, texture is how something feels when you touch it or how something would look like it would feel if you were to touch it. But I'm looking outside and I'm seeing all these wonderful textures. So I thought I'd share them with you today. Look at the textures of these leaves. These are leaves that are from last fall when the trees dropped all their leaves. And now that it's spring, the trees leaves that have fallen to the ground have dried up and they look completely different than they did when they were on the tree. They kind of have a papery sort of texture right now. And I might collect a few of these and save them for later. I wonder if you could find any leaves that you could save and maybe use in an art project later. Look at this cool texture I just found. This looks like some old flowers that probably broke off in the fall. They dried out and now they have kind of a neat texture, leafy kind of little texture, but you can see it's a little more delicate than the ones from the tree. Have you ever felt the texture of the cement or the ground, the sidewalks outside? It can have a really rough, hard texture. What do you think this texture is? That's right, it's the texture of the bark of a tree. It has a very rough, almost scratchy texture. I bet if you were to walk around outside, you'd see and find a lot of textures, maybe even some different ones than I did. So now that you've had some time to find some really interesting textures, I thought I'd show you how you can use them in your art. So if you happen to have a crayon or chalk or even a pencil and a piece of paper, you can take one of those items and just color, and the texture will transfer to your piece of paper. So I'm going to try to fill up this whole rectangle here. I folded my paper into 4 parts. Now this is a different texture than I would be if I were drawing on my table, which usually has a smooth, hard texture. But this texture of the sidewalk here has a really bumpy, speckly texture. All right, I'm going to go try another one. Hold on. So I found some kind of cool wood here, so I thought I'd try this texture. Now, if you're putting your paper on something like a wall or something, please make sure you're being careful not to color on those items. Ooh, this is a neat texture that this wood is giving me. This is from my deck at my house. I kind of like this blue one. It's neat. Stripy kind of texture. All right, let's go find another one. This deck box in my backyard looks like it might have kind of a neat texture, so I'm going to try it out. Ooh, it's not too much different from the cement that we did a little while ago. So I bet you're wondering what you can do if it's raining outside and you can't go out to find textures. Well, you can probably find textures inside your house. For example, I just found this. It's from some onions, and this is what it just came in the grocery store. So I'm going to put this under my paper. I'm going to get a crayon here and do the same thing. Just take your crayon and rub it. Now, when you're coloring with crayons, you want to make sure that you're not leaving big empty white spots. If you're doing a texture rubbing like this, just make sure you get a good area. And I'm going to see if I can, what if you can't find any other textures? Maybe you could only find a couple in your house. And so what can you do then? Well, you can also create textures. Artists do this all the time. Just by using lines and possibly even patterns or shapes. So for example, if I want, I tried to do the grass out there. It's just too soft. You can't do a texture rubbing on it. So perhaps I could do like lines just to show a grassy texture. short little lines going this way and that way. So if you want to do grass and you can't use the texture because the ground is too soft or maybe it's too wet and it's just not working out to do a texture rubbing, this would be great for hair. Or maybe you want to do something else. Maybe you want to just do lines all going the same way. Just by doing repetition, which means repeating the same thing over and over, it kind of creates its own sense of texture. So if you don't want to go running around hunting for textures, you can kind of create your own just by using crayons or markers or colored pencils. So I think I'll use some markers here right now. So what happens if I just do like really wiggly lines? Now, after I've made a bunch of textures, either by rubbing textures, actual textures, or making up textures and making implied textures. Implied just means that they look like they have texture, but in real life this does not. Maybe I could do, let's do like spirals, curly texture, and fill this whole area with textures. So we're not really worried about making it look like something, we're just creating a bunch of textures. I'm going to try to fill up as many as I can. And let's see. I've got some really cool textures here now. Let's do maybe some broken lines. Maybe I could do some polka dot textures. So I want you to know there's lots of ways to make textures, and you can use these textures to make a piece of art.